Picture a seemingly perfect marriage, spanning over 2 decades, built on trust and shared dreams, only to be shattered by infidelity and deceit. I am 47 years old, and my wife Samantha is 45. We had what seemed to be a happy marriage for 22 years, and are proud parents of 3 kids, our 20-year-old son Josh, and our 2 daughters Emily, 18, and Chloe, 16. Back in September 2001, something significant happened. Samantha had arranged to meet a man she met online at a nearby hotel. They had been exchanging texts and photos for months, clearly gearing up for an affair. At that time, we had only been married for 2 years, and our son Josh was not even a year old. It's incredible how different things were then. The tragic events of September 11th prevented her from going through with her plans. Her uncle, who worked on the 84th floor of the South Tower, died instantly when the tower collapsed. The whole country was in mourning, and Samantha was deeply affected by this loss. I stood by her, offering my full support during that tough time. Overcome with guilt, Samantha eventually confessed her intentions to me, expressing deep regret. She swore that their relationship had never gone beyond emotional exchanges, and even showed me evidence to back her claim. Before her confession, I had a nagging feeling that something was off, but I never suspected she was emotionally entangled with someone else. Her revelation was a gut punch. I thought I knew Samantha inside and out. She had always portrayed herself as someone with a strict upbringing, avoiding parties, drinking, and dating. She had always told me that I was her first serious partner when we started dating. After her confession, everything I thought I knew about her was thrown into doubt. If not for the tragic events of that day, she might have gone through with her plan, and I would have been none the wiser. I told her that if we were to consider staying together, she needed to see a psychologist. Despite my demands, she did not show any real signs of addressing the issues that led to her near infidelity. The betrayal festered as a painful memory. Eventually, Samantha did seek professional help and showed genuine remorse. We worked on mending our relationship, but once trust is broken, it is never the same. 19 years went by, and we had 2 more children. But on October 14, 2019, there is something unsettling about intuition, especially when it shakes the foundation of your relationship. One Monday morning, tensions flared when our daughter Emily had a heated argument with Samantha before school. Later that day, I tried to lighten the mood by playing with our family dog, which made Emily laugh. Samantha's reaction was unexpected. Overwhelmed with strong emotions, she seemed upset and distant. The first red flag was Samantha's decision to disable the location sharing function on her phone, something we had used for years to keep track of each other's whereabouts. This sudden change triggered my anxiety. The fragile trust we had rebuilt needed more attention. Desperate for clarity, I began searching for ways to access her phone, computer, and any other devices that could give me answers. My actions were driven by a need to understand what was happening in our relationship, which felt like it was being tested once again. Today we needed to take our youngest daughter, Chloe, to the post office to get a passport for her school trip. Since Samantha works at the same school Chloe attends, she offered to take her, and I agreed to meet them there. Both of us needed to be present for the paperwork, but throughout the process, Samantha seemed distant and preoccupied. There was an uncomfortable silence in the car, broken only by her periodic phone calls. She was clearly engrossed in a conversation with someone, raising my suspicions and heightening my anxiety. Samantha used to leave her phone lying around the house, but recently she started taking it everywhere with her. This change in behavior only fueled my unease. I also remembered her recent purchase of an iPad for work, which I had helped her set up. We had talked about this purchase multiple times. Her attachment to the iPad was no surprise. Alongside her phone, it became her constant companion, and she carried it around the house everywhere she went. One day she left it unattended on the table, giving me the opportunity to investigate. To my surprise, it was locked with a passcode, which was unusual for us since we never used codes on our devices. Samantha explained it was to protect confidential student information, which seemed reasonable. However, the possibility that she used it for other purposes lingered in my mind. On a Friday, we planned to meet at the bank to finalize a loan for our new house. After we returned home, she mentioned she had an errand to run. Curiosity got the best of me, and I checked our bank account. I discovered that one of her errands was a visit to an adult store, which immediately raised my suspicions. When I had the chance, I discreetly searched through her purchases and found some beautiful lingerie. Our sex life had been stagnant, mainly due to her lack of desire, so this discovery led to a difficult conversation. Frustrated by our lack of intimacy, I decided to consult a doctor. During my research, I stumbled upon several websites discussing low libido in women, which piqued my curiosity and led me to dig deeper. I began observing Samantha's actions without being noticed and eventually discovered the passcode to her iPad while she was with our daughter. With caution and determination, I accessed the device and saw a Facebook message from a stranger asking her to send a photo. Strangely, they were not Facebook friends, which puzzled me. It could have been a random person, but her reaction indicated she knew this individual. The conversation quickly escalated, and he suggested she should leave our daughter and be with him instead. Instead of keeping this information hidden, I made a hasty decision to confront her that evening. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a big mistake. Samantha lied about it and took immediate action to cover her tracks. She claimed the lingerie was for us and that she was trying to build up the courage to wear it for me. She said the person on Facebook was a former colleague from a summer job who suddenly started messaging her. She swore that their communication was only through texts and did not involve any physical contact. Although I wanted to believe her, I found it hard to accept her explanations. I told her firmly that all of this needed to stop completely and immediately, and she agreed. The next day I asked if the affair had truly ended, and she assured me it had. Little did she know I had seen their messages. Using other methods, I discovered she had told him to unfriend her on Facebook due to my demands, which meant she had lied to me. Here I am, 19 years later, facing a situation that feels all too familiar. At this moment, my emotions are a mess, and I'm confused. My appetite has decreased, I cannot sleep well, and I find it hard to concentrate. To cope, I have scheduled consultations for myself later this week and started spending more time at the gym. This situation is extremely painful, and I do not want to deal with it. Since the day I learned the truth, I have been reading Psalm 81 almost daily. Initially, I managed to handle the situation relatively well, but today was especially tough. I barely slept last night, which worsened my emotional turmoil. On a brighter note, our son, who was born before the first affair, surprised us with tickets to a play at the theater where he works. He gave us tickets to Come From Away, a production based on the events of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attack. We decided to pretend we were happy because it was an unexpected gift from him. In his early 20s, he is an exceptional person, and we did not want to disappoint him with a refusal or lack of enthusiasm. If you are not familiar with the production, it is based on the events of September 11th, 2001. The date is historically significant, and the feelings I had when we bought the tickets were a constant reminder of that specific time and a recently reopened painful wound preventing me from fully immersing myself in the play. Under different circumstances, in a different environment, I might have enjoyed the outing, but from the beginning, I wished to be anywhere but in that theater. To ease the discomfort, I started documenting my observations, noting dates, times, and my thoughts in a journal. I even developed a personal mantra to help me deal with similar situations. Stay calm, stay patient, stay in control. I realize I need to be more consistent in applying this mantra, but I'm working on it diligently. I have made significant progress in improving my thinking. Now, as we get ready for our evening shopping, I am determined to change my perspective on what is happening. As a result of my investigation, it turns out that her interactions with other men occurred during a summer school program, where she worked as a teacher's assistant. During this program, she connected with a physical education teacher who turned out to be 32 years old, while my wife, behaving inappropriately, is 45 years old. This situation can be described as her playing the role of a cougar. Her affair partner was a physical education teacher at a nearby school, while Samantha worked at a different school in another district. They crossed paths during a summer school program that accepted applications from teachers and staff from various districts. This unique setup allowed people with different educational backgrounds to work together in ways they normally wouldn't. I knew he would be in the program, but kept that knowledge to myself. Samantha, unaware of my suspicions, continued her routine. I decided to observe their interactions more closely and eventually found an intriguing message she sent him on Facebook. To my surprise, he seemed to brush her off, which made me smile. It appeared he viewed her more as a friend and wanted to avoid a romantic relationship, likely due to their significant age difference, about 15 years older than him. This belief was reinforced by previous messages where she mentioned an overnight camping trip, to which he didn't respond. Later, I learned she had informed him about the trip. We had some family discussions, but she didn't share my perspective. Despite this, I hadn't made a final decision yet, though I felt it looming closer. With significant life changes on the horizon, I believed it was crucial to have a well-established network of information sources. I began using tools like voice recorders, GPS devices, and electronic codes to gather evidence. Additionally, I diligently studied divorce laws in my state and sought advice from friends who had recently gone through a divorce. Their opinions would undoubtedly be valuable in this challenging situation. I also decided to take DNA samples from my 3 children. Not because of doubt, but solely for my peace of mind. Regardless of the results, my love for them remained unchanged. As for what I was waiting for, it was a combination of collecting enough evidence and finding the courage to acknowledge the reality of our situation. The realization that our relationship was beyond repair was becoming more evident, and I knew I had to face it head-on. Facing this harsh reality remained a daunting task, and I still struggled to confront it. Furthermore, I couldn't help but have a strong reluctance to expose my children to the turmoil of a divorce. Despite them being older, their well-being and emotional stability meant a lot to me, and I hesitated to subject them to the challenges and uncertainties that come with such significant life changes. Until this situation became entirely clear, I found myself in a peculiar position where part of me strangely took some painful pleasure in listening to her conversations recorded on a dictaphone. This allowed me to stay informed about recent events, such as her decision to unfriend many people over the past few days. Yes, I admit I was spying, which understandably upset her. I'm well aware that my actions won't be seen positively, but it's important to note that for the past year or so, she's been going through what I'd call a midlife crisis. She also lost her mother in November, which deeply affected her emotional state and made our already challenging circumstances even more difficult. Just 2 days after her mother's passing, we tragically lost my father. Within 3 weeks, we lost 2 more relatives. Amid all this grief, Christmas came, and a series of misfortunes befell our family, causing immense sorrow. I completely understand how these losses have profoundly affected her. Somewhere deep within me, a thought occurred. Maybe her current state of mind is a result of these recent events, and perhaps I should try to create some separation between the pain caused by these losses and the additional mental anguish a divorce would bring. I'm willing to make that sacrifice to prioritize the well-being of my children and loved ones. I've made the tough choice to exercise patience a bit longer before rushing into decisions. Ending a 26-year-long relationship is far from simple, especially when you consider the intense love I felt for this woman throughout most of our marriage. A love that often consumed me. I can't deny the power of these emotions. I'm currently planning to spend this week searching for divorce lawyers, but I'm also aware that my daughter has a birthday next Sunday. So I decided to talk to Samantha after the event. Though I'm not certain about the exact words I'll use, I intend to let her know I'm actively seeking a lawyer. By then, I hope to have found a suitable lawyer and be ready to initiate the divorce process. I hope there might be a moment of realization and reflection on her part. I've reached the point where I no longer want to continue our marriage, given the strong evidence I've gathered of her extramarital affair. On February 11, 2022, I discreetly installed a voice recorder in her car. Interestingly, listening to the recorded conversations has given me a deeper understanding of what transpired after the incident. I've chosen to mentally prepare for potential consequences that may manifest soon. To combat my insomnia, I decided to use sleep aids for a restful night's sleep. Additionally, I've redirected my nervous energy into returning to the gym. Regarding my decreased appetite, I aim to shed a few extra pounds I gained during my absence from training. To address concentration issues, I've made it a practice to diligently jot down crucial information and mentally review the exact sequence of steps for everyday tasks I might forget. Finally, I've been troubled by night sweats and am actively seeking remedies for that. When I stumbled upon these events, I quickly realized that this was another aspect that needed attention. I promptly collected some towels, t-shirts, and underwear and piled them up next to the bed. I assumed that handling these things, particularly during the cold winter months, could be especially challenging. After this initial reaction, a sense of relief washed over me. I no longer had to constantly hide, playing the roles of spies or investigators in our own marriage. I wouldn't need to tiptoe around sensitive topics to avoid upsetting her. Even before I had the chance to express my concerns, I understood that in recent months she'd been acting as though everything was fine, and this only intensified her frustration when I finally revealed everything to her. Receiving a box of her deceased mother's belongings from her father was a significant moment, but I surprisingly felt unaffected by it. Watching her reaction during our subsequent argument didn't evoke sympathy, sorrow, or sadness in me. After persistent persuasion and prodding, she finally asked, "What's wrong? Tell me what's bothering you." I simply mentioned his name. I noticed her excitement before she rushed out of the house. At that moment, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I no longer worried about her presence or felt tense as if I had to meet certain expectations or continually update her on my activities. As for recent events, something seemed amiss. Everything was going too smoothly for us, almost unnaturally so. Her unexpected kindness towards me raised suspicion. I noticed a peculiar change in her behavior. Things that would typically annoy her suddenly stopped bothering her. Initially, I viewed it as a sign of her newfound happiness, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at me, and I decided to take on the role of a vigilant observer. Imagining myself in metaphorical black sunglasses and a raincoat, I became a marriage detective. I discreetly installed a voice recorder in her car and activated the GPS navigation system. Casting a metaphorical fishing line, I was amazed to catch something on the first attempt. The recording contained 2 phone calls. The first indicated her intention to meet with him. Their meeting took place in a church parking lot and lasted about 40 minutes. Fortunately, I was spared the need to listen to their communication while she walked to his car. She made a subsequent phone call to her trusted friend living on the other side of the country who served as her confidant. If talking to him wasn't enough to confirm my suspicions, I now had no doubt about it. I might have found more incriminating evidence in that call, but if I really wanted to remain ignorant, her call to him would be decisive. Our conversation afterward followed her typical pattern. She tried to minimize or deny her involvement, shifting the blame to other factors. She harbored resentment about missed opportunities in her life before our marriage. She didn't go to college or have a carefree single life. Regrettably, she blamed me for this, and I accepted that blame. I had told her that if she wanted to leave, I would understand, yet she chose to stay, making her betrayal entirely her own choice. While I recognized my shortcomings as a husband, it was important to acknowledge that she wasn't perfect either. The idea of having an ideal wife was a far cry from reality. Consequently, I reached out to divorced women I knew for recommendations on lawyers and strategies. It was clear it was time to bring this to an end. Samantha, who had emotionally withdrawn from our marriage, showed no signs of wanting to reconcile. I wasn't willing to risk future betrayals, so I was leaning towards divorce. Are there specific tips or strategies I should learn about during this process? I was still overwhelmed with emotions. In a moment of intense frustration, I impulsively punched the wall, luckily without causing any damage. Alone in the house, I vented my bottled-up emotions, shouting curses. Thankfully, no one witnessed my outburst. During a particularly vulnerable moment, I broke down in tears during a phone call with my best friend. In that state, I fantasized about a perfect reconciliation, hoping that somehow everything would miraculously fall back into place. I wondered if it would be so terrible to try to save our relationship with a bit more effort, giving her the happiness she wanted. However, deep down, I knew these were just false hopes, and that divorce was the right path. I reiterated this to my mother, to my friends, and to myself countless times since discovering the betrayal. We mostly avoided each other, and during those times I deeply felt her absence. Changing our routines was incredibly challenging. We used to text each other during the day, checking in, sharing updates, and having light conversations. Casual hugs and kisses were routine, but now all of that had stopped. At home, we actively avoided each other. She chose to sleep on the couch instead of our bed. One of my simple morning joys had been gently waking her up when the alarm went off, stroking her back or arm, and softly whispering, "Hey honey, it's time." Unfortunately, those moments were gone. Every morning I'd wake her with a gentle touch and a soft whisper, which always made her smile. Despite everything, she hadn't left, and we hadn't officially separated, but deep down, I knew what needed to be done. Though it wouldn't be easy, I held on to the hope that there was light at the end of this long, dark tunnel. It was painful to see her envy our children, who had opportunities to travel and participate in exciting events through their school activities. Neither she nor I had those chances growing up. I took joy in seeing my children happy and having opportunities I didn't. Over the past 2 decades, I had dedicated myself to a local band, allowing me to perform at wonderful events. However, Samantha was envious of these opportunities. She ignored the countless hours of practice and dedication I had invested to pursue this hobby. Curiously, she often told me about people at work who recognized our music. It seemed she took pride in being married to someone who attracted attention. One day, Samantha complained that I left her alone with the kids when I went to perform, but I worked hard and brought home money, while enjoying my passion. There's no denying that performing is exhilarating. I had to manage concert arrangements, communicate with bar owners, maintain perfect rhythm, and engage the audience. Despite the fatigue from late-night performances, I still woke up early for a full day's work. Balancing these responsibilities made the days long and hard, but it was necessary because we needed the income to build the house she wanted. Leaving the band wasn't an option, it was a significant source of income. Her job didn't pay as much as mine, and my earnings from performances matched her steady job salary. This infuriated her since my real job paid 3 to 4 times more than hers. I aimed to provide my family with a good life, but instead of gratitude, I received resentment. The saying, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them," rang true. Unfortunately, it took me too long to understand who I had married. As a result, I've come to the conclusion that staying together would mean enduring more frustration and disappointment. I've gathered lawyer recommendations and will schedule appointments soon. Sadly, I don't see a future for our relationship. Divorce may not happen immediately, but it's clear there's no foundation to salvage our marriage. Ironically, those who know her outside our home see her as a wonderful person, a warm, caring mother who helps others, and she does fulfill these roles. But within our family, reality is different. She exhibits the negative traits I mentioned. It seems she has fallen victim to what I call the Palm syndrome. This coworker is also married to another colleague. I haven't told her family about this yet. Her father and his sister are her only relatives, and I don't communicate with them often, but I plan to inform her father at some point. I also contacted the wife of the man who betrayed us, but she hasn't responded. If I don't hear back, I'll send another email with more details in a few days, then respect her choice if she decides not to engage further. Tonight I mustered the courage to tell Samantha I wanted a divorce. There were hugs and tears. The intimate moments we once shared are gone. Thankfully, she understood the seriousness of the situation. We had a bittersweet conversation, wishing things were different. I asked her a tough question. "Did you not think about this outcome when you made your choice?" She admitted she was aware but remained deeply upset. It's painful to see her suffer. Despite my love for her, I realized I couldn't stay in this relationship. It's a decision I don't want to make, but have to. I believe I'll find peace in not being tied to her anymore. Our band is currently on hold, but I'm looking for other musical opportunities, focusing on classic rock with brass elements like Chicago. I look forward to the day when this difficult journey leads to strength and stability. Despite the challenges ahead, I believed I could come out of this ordeal stronger. Samantha had suggested counseling and reconciliation, but I shut that idea down, advising her to seek counseling for her own well-being instead. I felt a burden of responsibility for not ending our relationship sooner. Even though I had done everything I could to be a devoted husband, despite prioritizing her above all else, I ended up in this heartbreaking situation. I often wavered between wanting to salvage our marriage and accepting that it was beyond repair. This internal conflict only reinforced my resolve to move on. I had reached out to another betrayed spouse via email, but received no reply. Following another piece of advice, I gathered the courage to call and share my story. I had never felt worse, even though I knew I had done the right thing by providing the information she needed. Watching her heart break, I felt a pang of guilt. Reliving the shock and devastation was unbearable. Breaking someone's heart even unintentionally is excruciating. I assured her that I would be there for her through phone or text, even though we had never met. The conversation turned out to be therapeutic for both of us. After discussing our experiences, I understood the situation better. She thanked me, which reassured me that I had made the right decision. I was genuinely interested in hearing her perspective on her husband's behavior. It seemed he had fabricated an unhappy marriage story to gain sympathy and form a closer connection with Samantha. While I acknowledged her role in this mess, I also saw how she might have been manipulated. Samantha remained unaware of this new development. I had to reject a man whose infidelity destroyed 2 families, leaving 6 children to grapple with the fallout. I stopped communicating with Samantha and avoided being in the same room unless it was necessary for our children or household duties. The coldness in our home was palpable. It seemed she was slowly realizing the gravity of her actions. I sought legal advice and support from friends, planning my next steps carefully. Samantha didn't seem to fully grasp the seriousness of the situation. To create distance, I limited our conversations to essential topics like home, children, and finances. I avoided sharing a room with her. She began to understand the severity of the situation, but seemed to expect me to either overlook her betrayal or make desperate efforts to save our relationship. In the past, I failed to assert my needs and desires for our relationship. I settled for her apologies and minimal changes. I regretted my previous passivity, but I was determined to adopt a different approach now. I completely changed my behavior, avoiding casual conversations and small talk with her. Those interactions were a thing of the past. She struggled with my decision to let go of our relationship. Watching her grapple with the consequences was disheartening. She didn't seem to understand that the issues in our marriage were her responsibility. I knew I might never get an answer to the why question. Despite everything, that question lingered. We attended an event to celebrate my youngest daughter's performance in the school musical. She had a significant role and was outstanding on stage. Watching her sing, dance, and enjoy every moment was heartwarming. During the performance, Samantha sat next to my mother, who knew about our situation, though Samantha didn't know that my mother was aware. I felt for my mom, who must have been in an awkward position. When I finally told her the truth, she was genuinely shocked. She mentioned how happy we always seemed and how much she loved Samantha like her own daughter. During the performance, another betrayed spouse texted me to check on how I was holding up. Her husband had been involved in infidelity and had temporarily left home. She discovered he sought refuge with a friend who, as it turned out, wasn't there. This raised concerns about inappropriate behavior. I was relieved to reassure her that her fears were unfounded. However, I was still plagued by painful memories and obsessive thoughts. Despite my fleeting hopes for reconciliation, I was increasingly convinced that divorce was the only viable option. Continuing our relationship seemed completely untenable. The only sensible path was divorce, despite occasional pangs of nostalgia and hope. These moments were part of the healing process but quickly faded, giving way to the harsh reality that staying with Samantha wasn't worthwhile. I saw this shift as progress, because it forced me to question why she, raised in a devout Christian family with strong moral principles, would commit such a reprehensible act. Tonight marked a turning point. I followed her to a parking lot, where she lingered before entering a store and returning to the lot. Watching from a distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My intuition told me she was with him. To my shock, I found her car parked next to his. Seeking clarity, I contacted his wife, who had been in touch with me recently. She encouraged me to approach them, introduce myself, and take a photo as evidence. Following her advice, I asked Samantha not to return home that evening and drove home alone. She called me, crying and apologizing. Reluctantly, I agreed to pick up my things, hoping she would leave for a while. This confrontation finally provided the answers I needed and marked the beginning of a new turbulent chapter. But then an unexpected twist occurred. The DNA test results for my 3 children had remained untouched in our mailbox, where they could have been taken by anyone. Since I rarely received physical mail, I had forgotten about them. I had always believed all 3 children were mine, but to my utter shock, I discovered that my eldest son was not biologically mine. This revelation struck me with such force that I was stunned. Realizing she had been unfaithful in the early years of our marriage shattered my heart into countless pieces. I knew I had to be honest with my children, even if it meant delivering heart-wrenching news. Last night I mustered the courage to tell my son the truth. It was an emotionally charged moment, filled with tight hugs and tears. Meanwhile, my soon-to-be ex-wife was still absent after I caught her with her lover. Though he wasn't my biological son, I had raised him as my own, and he held a special place in my heart. In his 20s, he had grown into a wonderful young man, and any father would be proud. However, he wasn't ready to confront his mother over her actions. With a heavy heart, I decided to share this news with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I called her, gathered my strength, and revealed the truth. As expected, she burst into tears and apologized. She wanted to come home, but I firmly told her to stay where she was for now. Regardless of the DNA results, I reassured myself that he was still my son. Our bond went beyond genetics. Throughout this ordeal, I never hid my love for the children and reminded them of it daily. Surprisingly, now that the truth was out, I felt relieved. The constant worry and detective work were over. This marked a new chapter free from lies and uncertainty. I could finally let go of this burden and breathe easier. The days of tiptoeing around her were over. My children and I began the healing process, finding some peace amid the chaos. In the coming days, weeks, and months, we would face a range of emotions. But I saw a way out of the darkness. until the most tragic event struck our lives. Despite our anger towards my soon-to-be ex-wife, we felt genuine sorrow and pain when we learned she had died in a car accident due to brake failure. Our world fell apart. Initially, it seemed like an accident, but later surveillance footage revealed that her lover's wife had tampered with the brake lines. While my wife was with her lover and his friend at their house, the other wife had broken into the garage and committed this act. Unable to forgive their betrayal, she took drastic measures. Her involvement in my wife's death was confirmed, and she was sentenced to 8 years in prison. As my children and I coped with this devastating loss, it was a challenging journey. Life threw us a curveball, but the key was to get through it and learn from the experience.